It's Christmas time, and that means it's time to hand out some non-conference award gifts. Plus, Leif Thulin and I are going to have some Christmas time fun.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and joining me as he does every Thursday is our guy, Leif Thulin. Folks, it is Christmas time. If you're watching, you can see I'm decked out in a nice little Christmas hat that my grandma made for my grandpa years ago. I got a nice little Tree Rex Christmas sweater on. We're all ready for this wonderful Christmas episode, which is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss the movement into the conference portion of the college basketball season right there on Sling. The TV you love for a price you love. Try it today. So here's an overview of where we are headed. We're going to lean into some Christmas songs. 12 Days of Christmas. We're doing the 12 Days of Teams. Leif and I are each going to select a team in the AP Top 12 that is a gift we want to keep, a gift we want to send back, and a gift we want to try on to see if we want to keep it. We're going to look around at the We Three coaches, and we're going to build a coaching staff out of three coaches we like. You see all the fun interaction there. But first, we want to hand out some non-conference superlatives as we move into the conference portion of the schedule. So we're each going to give you our non-conference player of the year, our non-conference freshman of the year, and our non-conference first team All-Americans. Leif, let's get right into this thing. So glad to have you. Let's start with national player of the year. Who you going with for that category?
At this moment, I got to take the guy who's propelling the number one team in the country, Zach Edey. I think there's no wrong way to go about this, and there's a lot of players that deserve him, but no one more so than the gargantuan Zach Edey. I mean, he's big in presence, and he's also his impact is bigger than just his stats. He's averaging 22.6 points per game, 13.9 rebounds, and that's amazing, and just one assist. One thing I wanted to note about Edey is their offense runs through him. They feed him the ball, and they're good at getting him the ball in the places. But then he swings the ball out, and then he kind of gets hockey assists rather than true assists. And I think if you were to have Edey not play as much of a role in the offense would become stagnant. And that's why Purdue's been so efficient offensively, because Zach Edey's able to score at will, scoring 23 a game, but also able to pass and create the three-point options for Lawyer and Smith and all of their contributing factors, and that's what's made them a successful team. It can't be a one-man show, but he is certainly the stir that the straw that stirs the drink. He's a big straw.
He's a big straw. That's what we're looking for. Big straw, big drink, stirring it up. I love that. So that I'm not going with the same person, I'm going to go with Drew Timme. And part of the reason for that is I feel like people around the nation probably have Gonzaga fatigue and Drew Timme fatigue, but I don't want to miss what this dude is doing. On the season, he's the 10th leading scorer in the nation, 22.1 points per game, 8.3 rebounds per game, and he's dishing out, in difference to Zach Edey, 3.3 assists per game. And I think that's a part of Drew Timme's game that people kind of miss or overlook. But a big part of this for me is particular in the last 5 games. Listen to these numbers over this 5-game stretch, Leif. 27.6 points a game, 10.2 rebounds, 4 assists, all that on 66.7% field goal shooting. And found a stat last night that he is the only D1 player in the last 25 years to do that over a 5-game span, averaging at least 25 points, at least 10 rebounds, and at least 4 assists while shooting 60% or more from the field. Only player in D1 in the past 2.5 decades to do that over a 5-game span. Absolutely ridiculous. Drew Timme is my non-conference player of the year. Let's look similarly, Leif, at our national freshman of the year to this point. And I'm guessing I know who you're going to go with for this, but let's hear it.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a surprise. This is a guy I was high on coming into the year, and he's definitely helped his case. That's Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller's leading all freshmen in points per game. He's also propelling a team that's in the top 10, and he's the focal point of that team, where you could argue that's a pretty egalitarian offense, and it is. Brandon Miller is the guy that's number one on the scouting report, and he absolutely should be. Brandon Miller likely, from a draft perspective, is going to go in the top 10, and I think he's got an outside shot of finishing as an All-American. And he's not one of those typical All-American freshmen that are, like Marvin Bagley came in and he was absolutely dominant. Zion Williamson, and you knew they were going to be All-Americans within a few games. I wouldn't say he was like that level of dominant, but he's got a chance because he's scoring 20 a game for a top 10 team, and he's propelling the Alabama Crimson Tide.
I love to see that and that's absolutely who I would go with if we weren't going back and forth. But again, I don't want to name the same person, so let me give another answer. I'm tempted to go with Kyle Filipowski from Duke, just because he's the one out, was probably the third most touted freshman on that roster. But the guy I've got to go with is somebody I've talked about all non-conference season, and that's Gradey Dick at Kansas. The Jayhawks have unexpectedly, based on what I thought their roster would be, launched themselves right back into the national championship conversation again this season. And the performance of freshman Gradey Dick is a massive part of that. Somebody else on their roster is the best player right now, and we'll get to him in a minute. But man, Gradey Dick averaging, I lost my sheet there, 15.8 points per game, hitting 49.2% of his threes while taking 5.7 threes a game. That's great. He's averaging 4.5 rebounds a game. You like that out of a guard. 1.7 assists, 1.5 steals. And so I love what he's doing. I love his confidence. I love his swagger, and excited to see him against a Big 12 slate as we get into the new year. Great choices there. I think, Leif, love what you've got. Now, I want to stretch it out a little bit and look at our first team All-Americans. Now, folks, I don't know how you feel about this, and I don't know how Leif has constructed his list. I don't feel any notion that you have to go with an actual specific lineup that you would put on the court. Leif might have done that, but just know that it's like, we just want to see who are the dudes that we're going with. Leif, let's get your list.
Yeah, I tried to keep it positional, but there are a few that are stretching the limits. So the first two players that would receive the most votes for me is who I'll read first. Zach Edey, who's the National Player of the Year for me. So he's obviously on there. Drew Timme would be my second pick for National Player of the Year. So I'm right there with you as well. So that's your 5 and your 4. I'll go kind of in reverse order almost here and give you a 3. I think Jalen Wilson would be my 3. I think he plays the 4, but I want him there.
He could. I think he could.
This is where it becomes interesting. What point guard are you putting in there? I think it's Kendrick Davis would be my pick as my point guard. And then you asked for a 2 guard, and this is where the positioning is interesting. Is it Brandon Miller? Because I mentioned it before. Could he be with 20 points a game as a freshman? Is it Jaime Hawkins on UCLA, who's carrying a really big load, but he's about 17.5 per game? Could it be Jelly Walker for UAB, someone who's scoring 24 a game for a mid-major? So those are kind of the 3 or 4 I pinpointed that could play that 2 guard position. At this point, it's too early to really prognosticate. I will go with Brandon Miller because he's on the best team and he's scoring the most points. Jelly Walker, obviously, in the same state of Alabama, but I'll go with Brandon Miller because he's doing it for a top 10 team. But I do kind of want to put the shot out there that Jelly Walker is really good.
Hey, let's put Jelly Walker on our first team all-name team, right? That's what it's such a good name. Listen, my lineup looks very similar. I've got Edey and Timme. We've already talked about them, so we won't continue to discuss it. I've got Jalen Wilson as my 3 as well. I'll just add a couple things. Is that we've said it on this show before, Leif. I think you and I have even said it together, is that if Kansas was going to even dream of returning to the potential of a back-to-back national championship, he was going to have to be an absolute stud. And he has been 21.1 points per game, 9.3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.1 steals. He has elevated in a way I just did not fully expect. And I love to see that. I went a little bit positionless, and we're just going to have an oversized jumbo roster. My next guy is Adama Sanogo at UConn. It's just, For me, if you heard Leif and I chat last week, UConn's my number one team in the country. They've been my number one on our top 5 the past several weeks on Monday's shows. Sunogo averaging 18.6, 7.2 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1.2 steals, and just shy of a block a game as a 6'9" center, right? And so I love what he's doing for what I believe is the best team in the country. And then my 5th player, my guard, I want, similar with Jelly Walker, I just wanted to be able to shout out a dude at a smaller school. And I'm going to just go with the nation's leading scorer right now, Antoine Davis at Detroit Mercy, 24.8 points per game. It's absolutely ridiculous. Just an undersized guy, 6'1", 165. I mean, we're not Chris Clemens short from Campbell a couple of years ago, but Davis is shooting 87% at the free throw line. Now, here's the thing. His efficiency is not great. He's had at least 19 shot attempts in every game this season. And so I recognize that his percentages aren't all that high. But, man, gotta shout out the nation's leading scorer to this point. Leif, I love these teams. I love your picks for National Player of the Year so far and for National Freshman of the Year so far as well. Well, coming up, we're going to keep our Christmas extravaganza going. You hear me shaking the bells on my shirt in the background. We are going to look at our 12 days of teams, our little take on 12 days of Christmas, and share with you our thoughts on that. But before we do so, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to the college bowl season going on, to basketball to the World Cup that just wrapped up on Sunday in spectacular fashion, they've got it all at Bet Online. Make sure, in fact, you check out all the lines for the bowl season going on right now. Great opportunities there. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, folks. So what I said is this is basically, we're looking at the top 12 AP poll teams right now. And so instead of 12 days of Christmas, it's 12 days of teams. It's essentially a buy, sell, hold segment, but it's which current top 12 AP team is a gift you're keeping, which one is a gift you're returning, and which one is a team that you want to try on first to see if the sweater fits, if you want to keep it or not. And so just to run you through it really quick, folks, if you don't have it in front of you, the top 12 right now: Purdue, UConn, Houston, Kansas, Arizona, Virginia, Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Gonzaga, and Baylor. Let's start with the gift that we're keeping. Leif, who are you going with for this choice?
I think the easiest one would be UConn. I'm with you. They look the best. They've got a differential of 25 points, but I'll venture out a little bit out of the lane of taking the number, what I see as the number one team in the country. I think Houston fell a little bit after losing to Alabama at home, and then they beat Virginia on the road. I don't think Virginia was at full strength with Reese Beekman's hamstring. But that's a really big win. But the reason I want to keep this gift of a team is because their tenacity, their defense, there's no team that really has this emblematic style like Houston does. They have these good guards that can score late in the clock. They have these powerful rebounders on the interior, and their defense is going to stop everyone. So I have no qualms with keeping them in my top 12. I think they're going to stay there. I think they're going to contend. Are they going to have a few nights where they score 55 points and still squeak out a win and it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing? Sure. But I'm going to keep them in my top 12, and I'm enjoying that gift that is the Houston Cougars.
From Kelvin Sampson to you, my friend. Merry Christmas. I thought the same way, Leif. Like the no-brainers to go UConn, but I don't want to do that because I just don't want to be UConn all the time. So I'm going to I'm with you on Houston as well. So the gift that I want to keep is the Arizona Wildcats. I just can't believe what Tommy Lloyd is continuing to do in year 2. It's one of the, to me, if not the best front court in the nation, got to be top 3 with Umar Ballo and Tabelis out there. Love Kirkreese's ability to pitch ahead and do other things. I just think they have a nice balance from front court to back court. and pieces to continue doing it. I'm really curious to see with UCLA taking some steps forward, how these two contend in the Pac-12 this season. And in fact, they play at Arizona to close out the regular season. I think it's March 4th. So that hopefully will be a massive game there. But I am keeping Tommy Lloyd's gift to me this Christmas season. All right, Leif, Amazon sent you something. You don't want to keep it, so you got to take it back to Kohl's or the UPS store. Which team is a top 12 team that you're sending back?
I think it would be Alabama. I told you about a week ago we did the 8 teams that can make a Final Four. I wasn't quite sold on them, and the reason for that is they have a lot of players that can score. We talked about the guy who is their focal point is a freshman, and Brandon Miller, and he's had a few bad games against good teams. They've been able to squeak out wins, but some of those wins have been less impressive if you look at the context. North Carolina now is outside of the top 25, or they were at least. And so that looks like a great win. It was number 1 in the country. It was quadruple overtime. But anyone watching that game could tell you Carolina didn't look very good in that. And then he struggled in that game. And then you find some of their guard play. If the shooting ability of their guards abandons them, I think they have a really difficult time of winning a game. Beating Houston on the road was very impressive. They were trailing by 15 points. So it's impressive they were able to pull these close games out. But I don't think that the context is fully there if you look at it just from the wins and losses. So I'll be a little bit pessimistic on the Crimson Tide, despite loving Brandon Miller. I think it's just a harder path, and one that I'm not 1,000% out on, but I'm leaning more out than in would be the Arizona team. A little switch here.
I love it.
And the reason I say that is I'm a guards guy, and if you look at these 12 teams, I would say Arizona's guards are among the worst. I'm not saying they're the worst, but their front court is so much more impressive than their backcourt that if a team is able to minimize the impact, maybe Tubelis gets in foul trouble like he did against Utah, and Brandon Carlson matched him, and that's a loss. That they become less dominant, and their guards have to play well. They were able to edge out Tennessee at Arizona, but that's not a neutral site game. And Tennessee didn't play particularly well in my eyes in that one. So I'm not 1,000% out on them, but I'm leaning towards out on Arizona. I would probably send back that gift.
Hey, that's okay. You can send it to me because I want to keep it.
I'll load the Arizona stock to you. It's not too far from me.
That's right. It's not. That's perfect. For me, this is funny because I actually had this team that I'm going to say is the team I'm sending back in my Final Four contenders last week when you and I chatted, but it's Purdue. And it's for a similar reason that you just said about Arizona. The freshman backcourt has done infinitely, but I love what they're doing for guys who were, ranked outside like the top 90 in their recruiting classes. But I just feel like as we get into Big Ten play, and then as we get into March, there's going to be teams that are able to figure out a game plan and a blueprint for how to muck it up or mess with these young guards and get them into trouble. I just don't see a 6-game stretch where they'll be able to perform at a consistently high level. Like if I'm thinking Purdue versus Houston, I'm laughing at what Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shead are able to do to these guys, right? And I'm just curious to see on that. I think as you've talked about what happens if Zach Edey gets into some foul trouble, there's just not like a Klingon coming in behind him as UConn would have. And so I'm sending back the Purdue Boilermakers. I say boiler up. No, sir. Boiler this one down. Leif, what is a team that you want to try on your present and see if it fits good first before you decide whether to keep it or not?
Yeah, Tennessee is probably that one for me. I think Tennessee is a team that down the road, as we talked about the 8 teams that can make a Final Four, and I left Purdue out of it. So I probably, for transparency's sake, probably should have put them as the one I'd be sending back like you. So I'm all the way there with you. I think that was a great pick. Tennessee, I had them in my top 8 contenders to make the Final Four, and I still think I do. But their guards really have to excel, and that's where their strong suit of their team is in terms of the veteran guards, the ones that shoot well. But they haven't been able to create shots that haven't been, without kind of some scramble drill, late clock. Maybe we're going to drive and kick, and now this happens. Julian Phillips is their leading scorer, but I never have felt like Julian Phillips is like the lead option on that team. Olivier Kamwa, Uros Plavsic, that they have multiple sources of offense, which I think is admirable and actually very helpful once you get into March Madness and you need to win a couple games. Tyreek Key. But that said, I think there's a lack of clarity with this team on how to score. They kind of throw it around the horn and see, okay, well, maybe this matchup works, maybe it doesn't. And there's not a system. And so I think that they have dry spells that are worse than most of these teams. Like against Maryland, they were up by 20 and they showed why they're a Final Four contender. And then they lost all ability to score basketball and then barely won by 3. And so if you have dry spells and you're very good defensively, but it's hard to be so good defensively that you can atone for like absolute droughts. It's just not a dry spell. They have absolute droughts. And that's the reason I'm a little hesitant to put them on. So I'll try on this gift and I'm going to see if it fits before I truly love it. But I do think Tennessee has the capacity to be there. They just have these moments that are head scratching. They're puzzling.
I'm right with you on the Vols. I think that is a great choice. For mine, it's Texas. And it's very simple equation as to why. I believe in this roster. I believe in the makeup of it. I believe that it's skill sets and depth that can succeed and achieve at a high level in 2022 college basketball. But the question mark is the Chris Beard of it all. Is this team able to be the same team if he's not on the sideline? I don't think we've had enough space and time since his news came out for us to really know the answer to that. I think we're going to have to get into Big 12 play a little bit first to really start finding out. Their first true road game of the season is not until Big 12 play. And we found out with Duke on Tuesday night that your first true road test of the season often doesn't come easy, as they lost at Wake Forest. And so for Texas, I'm keeping the gift if it's the whole gift is intact. But if the ribbon isn't on top in terms of Coach Beard, then I don't know if I want to keep it or not. So I'm going to have to wait and see on the Texas Longhorns. Well, from our 12 days of teams to we 3 kings, no, we 3 coaches, we're going to try to figure out next who are the 3 coaches that you would want to build a team around if you were or a coaching staff around, if you were starting from scratch with a coaching staff. And so, Leif, I'll let you pick how you want to do this. If you want to build all 3 of yours at the same time, if you want to go back and forth, I'm good either way, but I'll let you start.
So I tried to dream up it's unrealistic, but I tried to make it offensive, almost like an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, like a set piece type of guy.
Yep.
And then there's my head coach and set piece / recruiting. So it's a little weird. So I'll give the theory and explain it all. And then we can kind of swap and ask any questions you have here. Cause this is, I got imaginative with this.
I love it.
And they're all head coaches. So I didn't want to pick people that I didn't think many of the listeners would know. So I took Randy Bennett for defense.
Ooh,
that's St. Mary's. They make the most of a relative lack of athleticism. They have an Australian pipeline, good recruiter right there, defensively oriented team that has excellent offensive sets. But I have him as basically a defensive coordinator. Offense, I've got Matt Painter. Matt Painter, no matter what team he has, they run beautiful sets. And sometimes I feel like like last year, I was frustrated at Painter because he ran beautiful sets when he had a guy like Jaden Ivey, who's an absolute dude. And this year, I think he simplified. He's like, you know what? Our guy is Zach Edey. We're going to run it through him, and we're going to run little screens for our shooters, and we're going to play through our best players. And I love watching all those teams. And then I have a kind of a 2-part here, and Jamie Dixon would be for set pieces and low clock moments. I watched him at TCU against Arizona. At that March Madness and TCU versus Seton Hall. And my friend and I, who listens to this show, he'll know who he is. We were driving home from TCU and Seton Hall, which we thought was going to be an awesome game.
Yeah.
Like, man, Dixon lapped circles over Kevin Willard. And like we couldn't even we were like, man, I thought this would be awesome. Willard looked disinterested. Turns out he was leaving Seton Hall for Maryland, and it was already a done deal. So but that's an aside. We're big Jamie Dixon fans. And then the recruiting to what the team plays like. This is an interesting thing I thought was interesting about basketball. Leonard Hamilton is the best at this. He picks his team to be exactly how he wants it to be played. Like they're all 6'6" and above with wingspans that do not that are never under 6'6". They can maybe have a 6'3" guard, but he's got a 6'6" wingspan. And the other alternative I thought of, but I'd go with Leonard Hamilton because he plays true to his guns. He plays 12 minutes better than your 5. And Tommy Lloyd at Arizona would be my other person I'd consider for this. Is they play fast, they recruit from all over. They've gotten 2 Estonians, 2 Lithuanians, Umar Balos from Mali. Like he's able to recruit whatever, and he gets people to buy in and play. But my head coach is my favorite coach in college basketball. It's Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett, he's calm. He's got his 5 pillars. He wins in the ACC. Everyone had this whole feel about Coach K being the most legacy-oriented coach in the ACC. So how could he not be the best coach in the ACC? How could Roy Williams, who's an amazing coach, and these are not slights to those 2 legends of basketball, but Tony Bennett, by any statistical measure, was the best coach in the ACC through those past 10 years. He's calm. He reloads no matter the team. He loses Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, Mamadi Diakite, all these guys, and they still win the ACC. So I want my successful coach who runs his system the way he runs it with this like calm presence, but stern. The defense is beautiful. The offensive efficiency is good. And there's going to be this almost wholesomeness to my Christmas squad here that is led by Tony Bennett.
Well, you got a little father-son combo. That's beautiful, you know?
Almost. Like the Bennett cousins almost.
Yeah. That's great. Well, for me, I kind of approach things pretty similarly, looking at trying to spread it around. Same thing. I went with all head coaches. And you know what? I had Tony Bennett as my head coach, so I'm gonna have to rejigger stuff around because I guess I shouldn't keep him if you're going to. I went big on recruiting in 2 different ways. Number one, I had Tommy Lloyd as kind of my international recruiter as well as my like offensive guru. And just clearly what he did at Gonzaga, not saying that things are going to drop off for Mark Few, but boy, he had that pipeline humming. I think he's, as you said, he's going to keep it going at Arizona. And then I also want to have a domestic recruiter. And so I'm going to have Jeff Capel be my domestic recruiter. I don't think it, for whatever reason, it's just not happening at Pittsburgh. Although the Panthers are playing a little better this year in the early going. But I just think he's better in not the head coach role. But boy, he had it coming in droves to Durham when he was at Duke. And so if we can have him come in and just bring some of that mindset and the domestic recruiting matched with Tommy Lloyd's international recruiting, I love that. And who's my guy that's going to bring it all together? The guy in Lawrence, Kansas. Gimme Bill Self as the head coach of this basketball team. I just think, similar to what you said about Tony Bennett, I think he just makes the best of whatever it is that he has. If it's one and done guys, he's gonna make a way for Kansas to be awesome every year. If it's with, like a Jalen Wilson, who we talked about earlier in the show, he's gonna figure out a way to make it happen. And their run in the Big 12 is just stupid. The stretch that they had of winning that conference year after year after year. So give me Bill Self as the head guy. And I know some people might come back and say, yeah, but, NCAA issues, whatever. I don't care. Bill Self is a great dude. Not only is he a great coach, he's somebody you want to hang out with and be around. And I would love him coaching my team any time of the day. All right, Leif, it is an uninspiring Christmas weekend of college basketball. Literally no Division I games on Christmas Eve. Literally no Division I games on the 26th either. For some reason, the Big East decided that they wanted to make some teams play on Christmas Day. We got DePaul at Creighton. I don't know why we're doing that. We got the Diamond Head Classic out in Hawaii. It's kind of going on. Probably the most intriguing matchup to me is going to be 16 Illinois and Missouri playing in St. Louis. You can catch that on the SEC network during Christmas weekend. I forgot to write the day down. I think it's actually Thursday that game is going down. And that should be an interesting one. On 12/22. Yeah, that is today, Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And so I'm curious, obviously, Missouri has the better record, but for my money's worth, Illinois is the better team. Both teams really close here to St. Louis coming down, and I expect to see the Illini come away with the win. The game I want to ask you about is also tonight, Thursday night, Butler at Creighton. Creighton, after starting the season preseason top 10, 6-0, is now 6-6. Leif Thulin, can Creighton get off this 6-game schneid?
That was the game I was thinking of highlighting. And the question is Ryan Kalkbrenner going to play? And is he going to be Ryan Kalkbrenner? Because ever since he's left, they lost to Arizona. They beat Arkansas. They lost to Arizona in the championship in Maui, and then they had one loss coming back. And you're like, okay, it happens to a team. They go play in a tournament. Maybe they're not feeling well. Maybe they're, got the hangover from playing in Hawaii and coming back to the States. And Arizona's a really good team. So that didn't bother me. But now I watch them, and their depth is really poor. Like, as soon as they go, it's Frederick King stepped in. He's doing his best, but he's not Ryan Kalkbrenner. Baylor Shireman is trying to play the role he did at South Dakota State, almost, on a team that already has two guards that are that before the season, they're not All-American candidates right now, but that before the season would have been All-American candidates in Ryan Nembhard and Trey Alexander. And I think that the depth is really, really bad for a team that's touted as being number 10. Like, Sharif Mitchell comes in, and Francisco Farabello come in, and you lose significant quality off the bench from those two guards. And then you get Shireman's leading the team in rebounds and shot attempts, and Arthur Kaluma isn't playing particularly well. This is too talented of a team to go 6-7 or below. I mean, if they were to lose 7 straight games, my goodness, that would be wild. So I do think they get off the schneid, but Butler's not a bad team. Like, Thad Matta's got them playing pretty well. Manny Bates on the interior is a problem if Kalkbrenner's not playing. And defensively, Eric Hunter is a good defender on the perimeter. Harris is a solid point guard. He presents problems on both sides. And there's talent on this Butler team. So I'm not going to say Creighton's going to win, but I feel like they have to win. It's almost – if a team that was in the top 10 goes 6-7, there are significant issues.
Yeah, gonna have to keep our eyes on this one for sure. I think you're right with what you said. Creighton clearly has significant issues, and hopefully Kalkbrenner is back. We want to see the best players play. And we're always going to be for these young men to be out on the court. Well, Leif, thank you so much for joining me for this Christmas extravaganza. I know that you are hanging out with your family. I hope that it is a wonderful Christmas weekend for you, my friend. Can't wait to be back with you next week.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, that does it for today's show. For your second listen of the day, let me encourage you to check out Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day. It's available on Odyssey, YouTube, and anywhere else you get podcasts. Please make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, and leave some comments. And we'll get back with you next week with some bigger and hopefully better games as we get into conference play. But that does it for Leif Thulin and myself, Isaac Schade. Until tomorrow, peace.